Hey, nice one. Thanks for having me, everyone. Let me just share my screen with you and get this going. Lovely. Can everyone see my slides? Nice. So I'm assuming everyone can see and hear me and see my slides. Thanks a lot for having me. I'm a little bit of a last minute addition to the show today, so I'm coming to you slightly off the cuff. My name is Bob. I'm the co-founder of the Quest of Evolution. So what I'll do is I'll run you through a little bit my journey as an artist. I was a musician for many years, so I want to give you a little bit of my background and a little bit of how I ended up in Web3, and then at the end I'll give my comments on what I think how sustainability plays a role in our project and in Web3 more generally. I suspect a lot of you are artists, so hopefully you can appeal to some of the things that I'll be talking about, and yeah. So just to start things off, like my journey as an artist is as eclectic as you would imagine it would be. And I think a lot of the people in Web3 generally have a lot of eclectic backgrounds. And I see a real distinction between being an artist in the Web2 world and being an artist in a Web3 world. So bear with me while I tell you a little bit about my background so that you can see what I mean about this. Um, so I started making music when I was a teenager. This was obviously way before Spotify, way before Satoshi's white paper, way before any of this. In fact, I thought would be possible, particularly being a co-founder coming from the background I came from. The music I started making was heavy metal music, so it was a lot of this stuff, a lot of hair. In fact, if I had time to prepare these slides a bit better, I would have probably shown you photos from those days, because it was pretty funny stuff. But the idea really started to cement itself very early with me that I was like destined for greatness. And I'm not just saying this, there's a point to this. But I felt so ahead of the curve at the time when it came to like writing and playing guitar and performing, and the feedback that I was getting from audiences and from everybody around me meant that my confidence was extremely high, and I felt untouchable and like destined, like I said, for something very special. Naturally, this caused some tension with my parents and my school at the time, but I was so determined and so committed that I was pretty much unmoved by any of the advice that anyone was giving me. That little owl on the screen, I'm sorry that it isn't in full screen, by the way. I'm not sure why the full screen isn't working at the moment, but that little owl on the screen represents my parents' wisdom. And the reason I bring this up actually is because that type of almost self-destructive outlook about what it was to be a creative professionally was a reaction to what my parents would always tell me, which is that it was a 1 in a million success story. It was an analogy that they love to bring up, and I'm sure a lot of people will relate to, which is that 1 in a million make it. You need a backup. You got to go to university. Hence the owl. So that eventually, as my journey in music started to progress, I started to play bigger concerts at that time, and naturally I started to face some adversity, and that 1 in a million phrase started to ring true in my mind. And that doubt that it instilled in me caused me to divert my path and make some new decisions that took me away from music. I ended up joining university first as a product designer, which didn't quite work out. But then I eventually transferred to philosophy school, where my intention was really to make contributions to political philosophy. I was a writer, I was a reader, and I was really interested in mainly social structures, how people assembled themselves, and why things were the way they were, essentially. Throughout this time, I was still playing music in my room, but with increasingly diminishing ambition. But nevertheless, I graduated from university. I wrote a dissertation on human rights and became a journalist. And so I was well on my way to this career to political journalism and perhaps later politics itself. everything changed at one point when Spotify became available. Apart from Spotify, it was also the incredibly mind-boggling boredom of what it was to be a journalist in a newsroom, particularly someone with my creative kind of nature and my anxiety. Um, not anxiety, just kind of high energy, hypermania type character that led me to start doing things on the side. So I downloaded Ableton. I'm not sure if we have any, I know we have a lot of artists in the audience, but I'm not sure if we have any musicians. But Ableton is a music software where you can basically produce music on your laptop. Now, this was very different than what I was doing before. Prior to that, I was singing and playing guitar on stage. So this was all real fresh start. I was only 23 years old, but at the time I felt too old to start something new, incredibly. At this point, I'd also put the heavy metal aside and I'd swapped it for a more kind of low tempo groove that I was into at the time. And it was a fresh start into the music industry and a more mature one, because at this point, I also realized that I needed to make money, and Spotify was the way that I could do it. So that's when I started uploading my music to Spotify, and the possibility of earning money seemed very, very real. Everything had changed. Now, everybody knows that Spotify pays infamously little. Now, this is obviously relative. I've been an ardent defender of Spotify. Never has it been so easy to make money from one's music, despite it being very little. So there's an interesting picture that was painted there that I'd like to use as a springboard for what we're later going to talk about in terms of what it's like to create in the Web3 space. But in the 70s and 80s, you would have needed like $80,000 just to build a studio, let alone to distribute your music, etc. So I was very thankful, and I felt like I was essentially at the precipice of something that, brand new, where I was able to make music from the comfort of my own home with very little startup capital. And lo and behold, I was successful to a certain degree. I became a regular on Spotify jazz playlists and Spotify electronic music playlists. And slowly but surely, I garnered a pretty huge following. I think I peaked at around 300,000 listeners a month at one point, which meant that I was making somewhat of a living. I could leave my job and I was making somewhat of a living. But then I quickly realized that something was wrong. This wasn't right. The system was to a certain degree broken, despite me being a beneficiary of the broken system. I did realize very quickly that this wasn't sustainable. And that despite the fact that more artists were making money from their work, there was an element of staleness and an element of kind of king making that Spotify had put themselves in place for. So at this point, I started to think a little bit further, and I started a record label with my co-founder Andrew Knocker, who's now my co-founder at the Quest of Evolution. He is also a musician and a longtime friend of mine. And we started this record label with the intention of basically using my leverage and my contacts with Spotify and my sex on Spotify to help musicians make that leap. But at the same time, we had just discovered smart contracts, and we were adamant that we wanted to introduce smart contract technology to mitigate our relationship with artists primarily, but also to give them opportunities. We decided that we were going to keep our fingers in the air, we were going to keep our ears to the floor, and we were going to know what was coming around the corner in terms of technological advancements in Web3, so that we could take advantage of it and help our artists break through. Now, lo and behold, this was another failure. And one of the primary stumbling blocks that we came across was intellectual property. So intellectual property, as I'm sure many of you know, is an umbrella term. It's a vague term, and I'm sure many of you have probably at least become aware of it as a result of your activity in Web3, or were aware of it and therefore transitioned into Web3 as a result. But essentially, being a record label owner means that not only have you got to be incredibly knowledgeable about all these terms in the music industry that sit below the term of intellectual property. These include, um, copyrights, performance rights, master rights, onwards and onwards. It's very difficult. And not only that, there's a geographical separation with all these things. If somebody were to start using my music today in China, despite the fact that I ticked all the boxes and I tried to do everything to by the book, there's a very good chance that somebody would be able to steal that music somewhere else and use it on the internet. And so naturally, this us grappling with this concept of intellectual property was what led us to really make the leap. Um, and what make the leap meant to us was to start something completely new. Um, it was Andrew who first had the idea for the Quest of Evolution, and the basic principle of the idea, and I will actually switch away from my slides shortly and show you our platform and how it works inevitably. We are actually launching on Monday, so there is some shilling due. But basically, what we decided to do was we wanted to create a creative environment where people could collaborate and their intellectual property would be tokenized. And but within that, obviously, there's so much possibility, right? We didn't know, was this a platform for musicians? Was this a platform for visual artists? Was it both? And eventually we stumbled upon an MVP that we thought was an exciting way to introduce the Quest of Evolution to the world and to really just penetrate the market with this gamified creative project that would allow people to collaborate and be paid. And the problem we were trying to tackle here primarily was the transparency of intellectual property and who owns what. But on a subsidiary level as well, we were trying to give artists a space where they could collaborate and be rewarded as a result, without having to worry about, the pennies on the dollar that you would get at Spotify. Regardless to say, this wasn't, the idea wasn't that we were going to replace anything really. It was more about enhancing kind of the creative space. And as an artist, like, I've always had the thought that people aren't just artists or not artists, right? People are eclectic, they're complicated, and therefore the options available to them should also be eclectic and sometimes complicated, to allow themselves to express themselves in as many ways as possible. So without further ado, I'll actually unshare for a moment and I will show you the platform and what we came up with. So let me just do this. Oh, sorry, something in the chat. Oh, not for me. Cool. So this is the Quest of Evolution landing page. So let me quickly just show you exactly how this works. So as you can see, this was designed by Samuel Day. He's an award-winning website designer who made this as beautiful as it is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump straight into the novel section. Now, you might be a bit surprised to hear that actually there's a big literary aspect to this project, despite the fact that I've been talking about music this whole time. That was more my personal journey to the point. But actually, we decided to create this platform for musicians, visual artists, and writers. Now, the way this works is that we've created what we call crypto novels. And a crypto novel is essentially a collection of very scarce multimedia NFTs, such as these, that contain elements within which. Let me just load this up for you. So as you can see, it's multimedia because there's a musical element. I'm not sure if you'll be able to hear this, but I'll play. And then there's a visual element, which is what you see on the left. And then there's the written element on the right, which is the most important part. And basically, by purchasing these NFTs, users gain access to add to these ongoing stories. So what we've created here is like a very specific gamified collaborative structure where people want to come and they can add to these pieces of writing, which hopefully will be by authors that they're excited to collaborate with, or perhaps one of their friends has collaborated and they want to add to their story. So this is really our MVP in the sense that we hope that this evolves into a project by which we can collaborate on music, collaborate on art, and so forth. So let me show you a little bit how it works. You would buy these NFTs on a third party marketplace. So for example, on Tofu, on Moonbeam, or MyNFT, or OpenSea, or anywhere else. We're a multi-chain project at the end of the day. And once you've purchased the NFT, you would connect with your MetaMask wallet by clicking here. This is going to take you to a coming soon page because this isn't out until Monday. But the website will interact with your MetaMask wallet verify that you're the owner of this particular NFT asset, and therefore grant this text box for you to add to the ongoing story. Now, this is really just layer one, and this is the MVP, our opening project, our opening product rather. But what we're trying to achieve, and this is kind of the secondary layer of complexity that comes with this, is that we want to tokenize the intellectual property of everything that's created within our ecosystem. So by contributing to these novels, you receive what we call KEV tokens, that's QEV tokens, and these will represent the intellectual property of your contribution to this novel. In addition to that, by contributing, you also join a royalty pool, so you'll actually be making money from every subsequent sale of this novel. So we've given artists multiple ways to be rewarded for their work, and also created a kind of dubious experimental chaos that comes with these stories. As you'll see here, each one is made up by 3 architects. So in this case, I did the music for this debut novel, and then we have the visual illustrations, which were done by this gentleman Faisal over here from Singapore, and Mariana Clark wrote the spark verses, which are the opening paragraphs to the stories. She's a playwright and an actress based in London. So um, so the secondary layer of complexity here is that not only are you receiving KEV tokens in exchange for your intellectual property, but also should we sell the intellectual property to these world building novels, to this, to the characters and the scenes and spaces and stories that exist within these novels, if we were to license them to third parties, everybody who's a KEV token holder, everybody who's taken part in the project will receive, will be rewarded for that. So, in a nutshell, what we have here is a right to earn novel. This is really important because this is currently right to earn. As I said earlier, we had to build some foundational technology to make this work. We needed to build the royalty splitters to sit beneath this, because otherwise this wouldn't have worked. The royalty splitters have to be splitting royalties to all contributors, to architects, to the Quest of Evolution, who takes a small cut, of course. And so this was really important, and that's really where our product team came to the fore, and they built this. And so we hope to build on that infrastructure one day. And the way we want to do that is to have it be collaborative to the fullest. So for example, if somebody were to come in, hopefully in the future, and make changes to the visual arts of these NFTs, we hope that that would also give them access to the royalty pool and therefore tokens. And the same with the music. But naturally, those things require more build, more ambition, and obviously therefore more time. But so I hope this gives you a rough idea of what we're doing on the Quest of Evolution. And this novel that I'm showing you right now is actually launching this Monday. It's going to launch on, just the debut is going to launch on OpenSea, but I will talk a little bit about the Moonbeam network as well in a moment. For various reasons, we're launching on OpenSea on Polygon because of compatibility, because the marketplace that we're going to launch on Moonbeam isn't quite ready yet, and we need that compatibility with our royalty splitters and the smart contracts. So we hope to get this up and running in the Moonbeam network very, very shortly. Part of the reason we decided to join Moonbeam and to be part of their project was essentially sustainability and scalability. And I guess this brings me a little bit to kind of the last section of my talk, if you like, because sustainability has always been something that's concerned me in kind of the Web3 space in general. My general feeling about this is that sustainability is ultimately what you make of it. I mean, consumption, I think, is a symptom of human endeavor. And I think, there's these facts that get thrown around all the time, that the Bitcoin network alone consumes as much electricity as Argentina and so on. And that is very concerning stuff. But I do think that the criticism should be pointed at our national grids at that level, rather than on what we're building on them. I think any ambitious kind of forward-thinking project, anything that's going to serve the world or people globally is going to naturally consume a lot of energy. And I think the arguments continue to be mostly distilled at the very foundational conceptual level as to, renewable energy and so forth. So I don't think so much, or at least me personally, because I do understand there are strong counter arguments to what I'm saying, but I don't think me personally have I ever pointed the finger at projects that are built on electrical grids as being too energy consuming, given the various benefits of, for example, blockchain. So I would add a secondary point as well, which is that with increased endeavor, with increased innovation, also comes renewable energy adoption to a certain extent. Now, I understand that this at this very rate is obviously a drop in the ocean, but with increased adoption comes increased efficiency. And so I think there is also an element of it gearing the conversation in a particular way that hopefully will have positive consequences in the future. This brings me to our choice of blockchain. At the end of the day, we could have easily from the beginning approached OpenSea and done this that way. But the numbers at that point in terms of energy consumption when it comes to the Ethereum network, for example, were pretty stark relative to other newer and more kind of ambitious projects when it comes to sustainability, such as the Moonbeam network. And I think that is really where Moonbeam kind of struck a chord with me, so to speak. Not only have they thought about the future and interoperability and what that means, and how easy it is to bridge and to scale and to kind of fulfill a blockchain internet type vision, but also they were already sustainable in the present tense, and that made it a really good selling point for us. It was also kind of sat more comfortably with us, and so I hope that our relationship with Moonbeam continues, even as its energy consumption continues to rise, even at a very slow pace. So naturally, I think the quest of evolution and Moonbeam was just a hand in glove fit. It also goes without saying that by contributing to our novels, we're interacting with the network, and it is completely nonsensical and goes completely against our philosophy if it was going to cost way too much money to contribute to these novels in the first place. That's completely counterintuitive. The whole point here was that we wanted to, in gas fees, that is, by the way, because the whole point was that we wanted people to be able to collaborate at low cost and at low time cost as well. So that was just another kind of incentive aligning thing between us and the Moonbeam network that I think is what makes it so amazing. And just Polkadot at a larger scale, I think, is an incredibly important and ambitious project, and that's what we wanted. We wanted to be at the cutting edge. Naturally, this sacrifices to a certain extent some market share to a certain degree, but we don't care about that because we wanted to grow together, and that's why I hope very much that mynft.com do manage to kind of complete all their beta testing and successfully deploy themselves on the Moonbeam network, because we can't wait to work with them and with everybody else at Moonbeam for that matter. So I think that brings me to the end. If you guys have any questions, I'm not sure if we're holding them immediately after I shut up or slightly later. I do understand that there's a lot of density to what we do with the Quest of Evolution. It sometimes isn't an easy pill to swallow from the get-go, but nonetheless, it is not as complicated as it seems. And ultimately, I hope it gives you guys, I know most of you artists out there, hopefully this flicks a switch in your mind in the sense that this is just another opportunity. Kind of goes back to what I was saying before, that I think artists are on a spectrum, so to speak, of there are a myriad of characteristics and interests, and perhaps some of you are interested in literature, or perhaps literature design or cover design or music, and so this gives an opportunity to everybody. I did actually also leave out one small detail, which is that we also introduced a charity of choice, which the architects who are the designers of the novels, they'll decide on a charity of choice. And we exploited our royalty splitters to make it such that a small portion of the sale price from every subsequent sale in perpetuity will go to a charity of the architect's choice. Um, Another point I actually forgot to mention that I will say now is that this particular novel, The Oracle's Verse, which goes on sale this Monday, is an infinite novel. So actually, people will be contributing to this far after we're all gone, which is an incredible responsibility, obviously, and pretty terrifying to think about. But it kind of adds to this crazy collaborative framework that we've set up. Not all novels will be infinite; some of them will be finite, and we are going to challenge ourselves to explore every possible genre of novel that's out there. So we're already working with people on kind of gore, horror, surrealist stuff, on romance novels, on comic book style novels, script format novels, erotic novels, cartoon, anime style novels, pretty much everything under the sun. And we want to give everybody an opportunity to not only purchase these, collaborate, hold them if you like, but also as architects. So I am, head of partnerships, as co-founder and head of partnerships. I'm always looking for architects. So these are writers, musicians, and artists to actually create these novels from scratch, and create these kind of playgrounds for people to then contribute to. And I suppose, what we're really trying to achieve here, is essentially to give you guys and everybody else that's creative in the Web3 space another opportunity to earn value, both in the long term as being Kev token holders, and hopefully earning value on the upside of the project as a whole in the long term, but also in the short term in the form of royalties and so on. So yeah, thank you so much for having me, Jimena. You've been awesome. And I don't know if now is a good time to take questions or later, but I'll be here either way. So thank you very much.